Okay, next page, please. So my presentation, I'm going to talk a bit about tobacco history in Taiwan first, and then the second part will be looking at a different case study of tobacco industrial heritage in Taiwan. Okay, so next please. The historical development of tobacco industry in Taiwan. So mainly nowadays we call the tobacco industry in Taiwan is the tobacco plant, which refers to the yellow type tobacco. So this species is introduced by the Japanese people during the Japanese colonial period. But actually before the 1895, we cultivate different kinds of species in Taiwan, so includes the Turkish species as well. And indigenous people, they did cultivate the indigenous species as well. And different kind of species only have small scale cultivation in Taiwan during that time. Also, during the Japanese period, Japanese people introduced the yellow type tobacco into the immigrant village. The reason why they introduced the yellow type into the Taiwan is that because during that time they set up the immigrant village in Taiwan, which means that the Japanese people moved to Taiwan and live in those immigrant village. Basically, at the very beginning was in eastern side of Taiwan in Hualien County. And during that time, their living condition is not very good. It's a very poor condition. So their life was very hard. So Japanese authority just went to the US and to do some kind of research and investigation. They just found probably they can try to grow tobacco in immigrant village will make their life better. So they just try to cultivate it. And after that, they just found the harvest is quite good. So the Japanese people started thinking about we should cultivate more yellow type tobacco in Taiwan and extend from the first village, the cultivation area from the first immigrant village to the second and finally to the third. And also finally from the eastern Taiwan to the whole around the Taiwan, we all did yellow type tobacco cultivation all around the Taiwan. This is from the history perspective. And from economic perspective is that the Japanese authority in Taiwan also include the tobacco cultivation, the tobacco business into the state monopoly in 1905, which is a year after the Japan who set up the monopoly policy in the Japan itself in 1904. And after the Second World War, the monopoly policy was continued because the tobacco, the monopoly income is a very good support for the authorities in Taiwan. I mean, for the national finance, especially the tobacco. So that's why after the Second World War, the new regime came to Taiwan. They continue the monopoly policy, and also they encourage people to involve into the tobacco cultivation. So the tobacco cultivation have a huge extension, and then on the other hand, they also encourage the normal people to smoking, because if we smoking much more, then we buy more and more cigarettes, then the state can earn more and more income to support the national economy. Yeah. And however, currently we nowadays we understand that smoking is so dangerous, it's harmful to the human body. So nowadays we promote anti-smoking. And this is a reason why the tobacco industry declined in Taiwan. And the other reason is that Taiwan is keen to make the international connection. So in 2002, we joined the GATT, and then after that, we joined the WTO. So which means that we need to open the market to the whole world, so which means that monopoly need to be ended. So our monopoly bureau has been finished and then reorganized as a company. The tobacco industry, the tobacco industry declined, the cultivation area was reduced. So finally, the whole cultivation ended in 2017. So officially nowadays, our government, I mean the authorities in Taiwan, we they don't buy the tobacco leaves from the tobacco farmers anymore. Okay. Yes. Next, please. This is some photo to show that the Japanese people cultivate the yellow type tobacco in Japanese period. So these are all the photos taken from the immigrant village. So you can see the Japanese people cultivate tobacco, and the tall building at the back was the tobacco burns, which is used for curing tobacco leaves. And the photo at the bottom left, that one is the process that when the tobacco farmer trade their tobacco leaves with the Monopoly Bureau. Next, please. And because tobacco industry in Taiwan was kind of monopoly, so this is a structure to show how the government supports the monopoly related to the tobacco industry. So at the top is the Monopoly Bureau. And after that, we have three sectors. The first one is the tobacco re-dry factory. And the middle one was the cigarette factory. And the other one is the Tobacco Research Institute. And basically, after the re-dry factory, they set up the assistance place, They set up several assistance places at a different area where the people cultivated tobacco in Taiwan. And this place also used for trading as a trading place. So which means that tobacco farmers will transport their leaves to this place and make a kind of trade with the Monopoly Bureau. And at the bottom is the tobacco farmers. Next, please. So tobacco industry in Taiwan declined since the 1970s. So gradually declined, left behind many different kinds of tobacco heritage, factory burns, also landscape, and some like the memory, these kind of things now become kind of heritage. The photo at the right-hand side is a tobacco farm. During that time, people still doing tobacco cultivation. This photo was took in eastern Taiwan in the Fengling town. And the photo at the left-hand side is abandoned tobacco burns, so which was used for curing tobacco leaves in the past. But nowadays they don't use it anymore, so it's just abandoned. Next, please. So next session, we are going to move on to looking at different case studies of tobacco industry heritage in Taiwan. Next, please. The first one will be the Songshan Tobacco Factory. This one nowadays we call it Songshan Cultural and Creative Park. This factory is a final product factory, so it means the cigarette factory. Okay, it's not a re-dry tobacco leaves re-dry factory. It's a cigarette factory. It was built in 1939. It's a very first modernized tobacco factory in Taiwan, and we would say this one is designed as an industrial village. What we mean as an industrial village is that means that it is not only a kind of factory, but it is also kind of a living place, because different buildings inside have different kind of function. Who is offer different kind of services that the workers they need in the whole day. So, for example, we will have a bathroom inside, we have nursery, canteens, medical center, and even in this case, we have a European garden, a very big one. It's a very popular one. So nowadays, if we go to this place, everyone will join a short time to walk around in this European garden. So at that period, it's a very special case that a factory that design have a very different kind of functions all inside, and even a garden, so which means that workers can have a bit leisure time to walking around, which believe could be improve the working efficiency. However, following the industry decline in Taiwan in 1998, the factory was ended for the cigarette production. and soon designated as a heritage in 2001. After the conservation work, it reopened to the public as a cultural and creative park in 2011. So since 2011 to nowadays is 2022, so it's just around 10 years. Yes. Next, please. When it becomes to the cultural and creative park, basically is run by the Taipei Cultural Foundation, and the mission for them to manage this place is make this place become a kind of creative hub of Taipei. So that means a place that for cultural, creative networking, for art communication, and public gathering. And nowadays it's very popular because they have different kind of art exhibition in this place. And also the young generation, they can set up their small shop inside, can selling their design work or different kind of technique work. They can communicate face by face with the peoples to talk about their idea about creative art or creative industry, or creative culture. However, but this kind, actually, we not only have this case too, which means, the factory becomes to a kind of cultural and creative park. We actually have several cases. Just like the Songshan Tobacco Factory, in the past it was a factory, and nowadays it's become a cultural and creative park. For example, the one was very close to the university that I work for is the Huashan Cultural Park. That one in the Japanese period was a brewing factory. So it's quite similar. So as these cases that people might argue that how we make the balance between the cultural preservation and the creative industrial development. Because I think we don't have that much nexus. Of course, the factory was left and we preserve. The building, the physical things we preserve. However, if when we went this place, we cannot see any intangible things that related to tobacco history, or kind of very clear information about the history or the cultural and the cultural significance of this place nowadays. Okay, next please. The photo at the top right, that one was the thing nowadays for the whole cultural and creative park. And the other three photos were the bathroom inside the factory in the past. The photo at the bottom right, that one was the bathroom before the conservation work. And the left-hand side, those two photos is the bathroom after the conservation, and now it's reopened to the public. We call it the name is not just a library, so it becomes a kind of library. It's just opened 2020. So you can see they just redo the interior design and become a very comfortable library. It's quite a popular place. Every time I went there, a lot of people just inside reading or typing their work, discussing different kind of project there. However, it's a bit shame that we cannot see any historical things that related to the bathroom, because as I just mentioned that because this factory was designed as a kind of industrial village. So the bathroom is kind of very special things compared with the traditional factory. That we don't have this kind of part inside the factory, but this modernized factory we have this kind of like bathroom inside, and we protect them and preserve them, and then we reopen to the public. But when the visitors go there, we cannot see any historical connection there. So like talking a bit story about the bathroom, these kind of things, we can't see anything about that. So I think it's a bit a shame that the heritage reinterpretation is quite late. Next, please. This is a kind of partnership from the factory the factory itself, I mean the cultural and creative park itself, and walk out the walls, walk out the boundary to find a partnership from the outside, which is the department that I'm now working for. So it's a kind of partnership between the university and the Taipei Cultural Foundation. What we try to do is that, as I said, because I think the heritage interpretation is quite weak in the cultural and creative park nowadays. So we try to find a way out to use different ways to improve this part of problem. What we did is that our students designed a real-world puzzle for the tobacco factory, which is mainly focuses on the history and the memory of the tobacco factory. So our students will go there to understand the historical development of the tobacco factory and also tobacco history in Taiwan. And then they found some very particular elements from the real world. So from the architecture, from the factory, from the whole park, and then design as a game. So we produce a kind of game box. So if a visitor got this game box, they can, during the time they play this game, they can understand more about the tobacco factory's history and the memory of this place. Yes, next please. And the second case is in Taichung, in the middle of Taiwan. This one is under conservation, so we cannot get inside at this moment. We hope we can get in very soon. And this one was built in 1942, was established under the extension of tobacco cultivation in Taichung area. Taichung area is quite an important tobacco cultivation in the past. And during that time, the factory also worked very closely with the Taichung Tobacco Research Institute. It's also in Taichung. Yeah, they are all very important institutes that related to tobacco industry development in Taiwan. And the factory was in use until 2017 and under conservation now. Next, please. And the interesting of this case is that before the conservation work begin, they find a day to let the public can approach to this place. Because in the past, the tobacco was monopoly control. So, for example, those factories that people cannot get in because it's a monopoly control. So it's all controlled by the government. So people cannot get in to know what looks like inside. But because this kind of place changed to a kind of heritage, so nowadays people can get in. And before the conservation work, this case just opened the factory to the public, so we can get in on that day. And in these days, they also use a kind of games, puzzle games, for people to understand a particular part of the architectural style inside the factory. And the venue, the game when I played, I experienced the venue is the bathroom as well. Yeah, so this is a bathroom inside the Taichung Redrive factory, and they just put the game there so we can play the game in the bathroom in the factory. And so finally, if you complete the puzzle, you can see on the photo at the top right, that one you will understand the very specific architectural style, interior architectural style inside the factory. Next, please. Next section, we are going to see different kinds of tobacco industrial heritage in Taiwan, which is a trading space. And this one is in Taiping, also in Taichung. The trading space is the place that tobacco farmers will transport their leaves to this place and then do a trading with the Monopoly Bureau. Taiping, they conserve this trading space and redesign as open space to the public, and the whole trading space is separated into two sections. One of it is kind of display hall, which is mainly focuses on the tobacco history, talking about the industry history there about the tobacco. And the other part is a kind of display hall for commemorating a local artist there. And in this case, we also have a very special place. Is that if you can see the top photo, the top right, the photo is an open air garden. So the garden, like growing tobacco there for the public. If you go there to visit, then you will see the real tobacco leaves. Because nowadays, I think the most of people they don't know what the tobacco looks like. So they try to cultivate a real plant there, and people can understand how tall it could be. These kind of things. Next, please. And the other things that this place is doing very well is that I think for these 10 or 20 years, when we're talking about tobacco heritage in Taiwan, sometimes we will come from this kind of different arguments, especially focused on the anti-smoking, raising by the anti-smoking group. Because people might argue that why we should talking about tobacco as a contemporary society. We don't want people to smoking because we know smoking is harmful. So why you should talk about tobacco, which might imply that people to encourage to approach tobacco. Yes, it's kind of controversy that some people might argue. But actually, this is two different stories. The one story is that we try to keep the memory, keep the history or story of the tobacco industry in Taiwan, because in the past it's a very important agriculture of Taiwan. We call tobacco a kind of cash crop. And a lot of people just rely on the tobacco cultivation. It's also a very big income for our government. And the other story is that we know smoking is harmful, so we should not encourage people to smoking. Yeah, but this is two different stories. It should not be mixed. But sometimes this kind of controversy just came out. A lot of people might argue. So nowadays, as we want to do a heritage interpretation nowadays, especially in terms of the tobacco, for example, type in trading space, do a very clear declaration that's saying that we are not going to encourage people to approach tobacco or to smoking. But what we are doing is that we try to evoke the people or make the people to understand in the past what kind of tobacco industry we have. And that's why nowadays we have this kind of tobacco heritage in the contemporary society. Okay, next, please. And next part, we'll move on to the tobacco burns. These plates are used for curing tobacco leaves. So after tobacco leaves harvest from the landscape, they need to be cured. After cured, they can transport to the trading space to do the trading with the Monopoly Bureau. And these places mainly are private. So this is a very big difference from the factory or trading space. Because the factory and the trading space mainly are all public, made by the state, but the tobacco burns are all private. And we have a very traditional style, which you can see the photo at the bottom right. This one is we call Asaka style, so it's a Japanese style because the yellow type of tobacco was beginning the cultivation by the Japanese people. So everything is learned from the Japan. So the design of the curing space, the tobacco burns, is also a Japanese style. And this traditional style, if people want to do in a tradition, do the curing tobacco leaves by a traditional way, is very intense of like human power. So in the 1970s, we import the new style, which is using a machine. So you can see the photo at the left bottom. That one is a curing machine. Yeah. And the photo at the top right is the people in the past that work inside the burns, the traditional Japanese style tobacco burns. So because the burns might high around 2 or 3 flowers, it's quite high. So the old photo. Okay. And next, please. And because they are private, so always facing a very a lot of difficulty when we are when people would like to, or the people means that the local people, the local authority, or even the national authority, they want to preserve or conserve this kind of place because they are private. So a lot of issues need to dealing with the owner or the local people. So some place they just try to do some kind of public-private partnership to regenerate these tobacco burns. For example, you can see the photo at the right-hand side. The middle, that one is conserved by the public funding, by the local authorities, and managed by the owner. So the deal is that we preserve the tobacco burns by the public funding, and the things that the owner need to do is that after the conservation work, you need to manage by yourself, and for 6 years, and you need to open to a public anytime in these 6 years, which means that when the visitors go, you need to open the door for them to get inside to look around to understand, and you will be a kind of guide to show the stories, to show the functions of the tobacco burns for those visitors. Yeah, so it's kind of cooperation between the authorities, local authorities, and the owner. Yeah. But I think most of them just abandoned. So you can see as a photo at the left-hand side, that one was the only one left in Yilan nowadays in Sanxing County. Next, please. Yeah, because these kind of burns are all private, so face different kind of difficulties when people want to preserve it. So some people just protect by themselves. But because conserve or preserve tobacco burns might spend a lot of money, they don't have that much money, so they will do different they will find a different ways out to try to protect their own tobacco burns, because it's a very important kind of industrial partner for the farmers. Yeah, because they spend a lot of time working with the tobacco burns. So the photo at the left-hand side is that people just using the metal skin to protect the tobacco burns. Very easy way and much cheaper way as you do a formal conservation work. But the photo at the right-hand side, this one is another case in eastern Taiwan as well. This one was being conserved by local people and then transits into a kind of bed and breakfast. This one is a very good case that they do the preservation by themselves. It's a very well protected, and even inside the stove or very detailed things inside of the tobacco burns are all clearly preserved. So if we get inside, we can see the things that are very traditional, very original inside the tobacco burns. And some people change their tobacco burns to a kind of storage because they are not curing tobacco leaves anymore nowadays. Yeah, or some people might just do some kind of construction work and change it to a kind of living place. So they just live inside the tobacco burns. Okay, next please. All right, so this one is the last one. I think the tobacco industrial heritage is a kind of story from the industrial facility to the industrial heritage. And the tobacco itself is kind of from the cash crop to the agricultural heritage as well. So the story is about how this space or even this crop are produced in the past and the ways they are represented in the present. So it's a kind of course over the timeline, but we still need to think about how we connect the past and represent it in the present. And further, we also need to explore how the spatial meaning is transit when those tobacco-related spaces are heritageized. And the photo at the final slide is the tobacco flowers nowadays. I think some farmers still do tobacco cultivation, but it's just for kind of commemorate the history of the industry that they evolved itself for like 70 years for a long time. And nowadays they don't do this kind of industrial things, but they still growing tobacco as kind of commemoration. And also in the past, we won't see the tobacco flowers because if we make them flowering, that means that the leaves won't be, the quality of the leaves will be not good. So we are not allow, we won't allow the tobacco to flowering. Yeah, but actually the flowers is quite beautiful. So nowadays some farmers still cultivate as kind of to keep the memory of the history. Okay, the next one, just the end. Yes, thank you.